Radio with Brannon Howse.
All right, welcome. Glad you're with us. Okay, so everybody's talking about the speech last night. It was a 16-hour day in the studio here for us yesterday. Not complaining, because we like those kind of days when there's lots of news and lots of information. Makes our job easier, actually. But it was a great speech, no doubt about it. And it, of course, brought out a lot of controversy that didn't need to happen. And one of those was the behavior of some of the Marxist Democrats holding up their little signs. And then, of course, you had Al Green of Texas interrupting the speech at the very beginning, waving his cane at the president, and then having to be ordered out by Speaker Johnson with the assistance of the House chamber authorities. I mean, this is what they do. This is how they behave. And everyone is talking today about the little boy, DJ, adorable little boy. He's 13 years old, and I think he's had 13 surgeries for cancer. He loves law enforcement. He was wearing his uniform last night, and I think one of the most inspiring parts of the whole evening was when the Secret Service director, one of the guys, the newly appointed director of the Secret Service, was one of the guys that was there with President Trump on July 13th, by the way, Butler, Pennsylvania, gave this little boy an honorary membership as a Secret Service agent. Now, you would think everybody, I don't care what your political persuasion is, everybody could stand up and say, that's wonderful. And certainly when this little boy of color hugged the neck of that white man, that was also a great moment for our country at many levels, right? Where people are always trying to divide over race, when there's really only one race, the human race, trying to divide people groups, trying to divide us economically. It was adorable. It was inspiring. It was uplifting. It was positive. No, the Democrats remained seated. They think that kicking men who pretend they're women out of women's sports is bad. They think that stopping sex change operations on children is bad. I think you guys all know where we all stand on this. I think we all stand together. Well, I had the opportunity last night to interview after the speech Congressman Glenn Grothman of the 6th District of Wisconsin. I want to play that for you. But I also had the opportunity yesterday afternoon to interview for the first time Senator Ron Johnson, also of the great state of Wisconsin. I've never interviewed the senator, and I want to tell you up front, I did not send him the questions in advance. He had no idea what I was going to ask. And he didn't, as I say in the interview to him toward the end, he didn't sidestep one of my questions. So I want to play those for you today, the interview with the senator and then the response to the speech last night from my friend, Congressman Glenn Grothman, who will be with us at the Waukesha Expo Center coming up on the 15th of April at, 6:30. We pushed it back a little bit because we've added in Aaron Lavarco. 6:30 Central to 9:30 that night at the Waukesha Expo Center. Glenn will be with us. Congressman Grothman will be with us as well, along with Dr. Andy Woods and Aaron Lavarco and myself. Again, it's free, but you got to have a ticket so that we can be sure to have a seat for everybody. Worldviewtube.com/events is the website, worldviewtube.com/events. All right, let's go right away to an interview I pre-taped yesterday with Senator Ron Johnson. Joining me now is U.S. Senator Ron Johnson from the great state of Wisconsin. Sir, thank you for making time for us today.
Well, Brannon, hope you're doing well.
I'm doing great. We're glad to have you with us. And I know many of our listeners, we have a huge audience that I've been broadcasting through the VCY America Radio Network since 1996. So we have a lot of your audience, our audience, which, of course, you're their U.S. Senator. So I know a lot of them are pleased. But you've been taking on issues that everybody from every state should be thankful that you're taking on. Let's get to the issue of our debt, our spending. 7.3 trillion. Is that our government spending this year, Senator?
That's the best projection we have right now. And again, that compares to 2019, we spent $4.4 trillion in total. Then we went on the COVID spending spree and never stopped. And we spent $6.5 trillion the next year. We've averaged $6.5 trillion over the last 5 years. Last year we spent 6.9. This year about 7.3. And I asked my colleagues in Senate lunch today, I said, did anybody think we spent too little in 2019? And nobody thought we did. Then I asked them the next question. Well, let's say we take that spending, increase it by the growth in population and inflation, and we use, in terms of our total budget, we use today's Social Security and Medicare and today's interest. I mean, would that be a reasonable approach in terms of setting a spending baseline? Nobody disagreed. I said, well, that number would be 6.5 trillion versus 7.3. And here we're discussing how hard it's going to be to save 1.5 to 2 trillion over 10 years, which would knock down the 7.3 to 7.1 or 7.15. I mean, what the House did, God bless them, love them, grossly inadequate. We have to return to pre-pandemic level. And by the way, I've got other pre-pandemic levels. I've got laid out 4 options for my colleagues. Bill Clinton, 1998. If you plus that up the same way, it goes from 1.65 trillion to 5.5 trillion. Obama's 2014 outlays would go from about 3.6 trillion to 6.2. Again, 2019 goes from 4.4 trillion to 6.5. And then what Lindsey Graham actually used in our budget committee is Trump's own budget for 2025. His last year in office would put us about 6 trillion, 61 billion. That is the Senate budget. That's our goal. Reset the baseline at 6 trillion, 61 billion. I'd be satisfied with that. But there's no way we should be even thinking about spending anywhere more than $6.5 trillion. And here we are on a path 7.3, and the House passed a budget resolution to not go basically below 7.1. Again, grossly inadequate.
How is DOGE going to help you with cutting costs? What are your thoughts of DOGE? Are you impressed with what you've seen so far? You have any concerns?
No, absolutely no. I mean, Elon Musk, one of the most brilliant, accomplished, effective human beings to ever walk the face of the planet. God bless him for what he's doing, and his team of experts at delving into data and asking questions that should have been asked. Controls should have been in place. So what they're doing is they're exposing it, right? They're exposing outrageous examples of waste, fraud, and abuse, but it has to be codified. They've stopped a lot of these contracts, but that's only a temporary stop. The president will fight out whether he has the ability to impound those funds, never spend them. But Congress appropriates the money. A president signs it. Once signed, that's what's got to be spent, apparently. So we need to use our power within reconciliation to actually codify and reduce government spending. Again, just to a reasonable pre-pandemic level. There's nothing draconian about this, whatever. We're not dramatically slashing government. Government was too big in 2019. It was too big in 2014. It was too big in 1998. Again, any one of those increased by inflation and population gives us somewhere between 5.5 to 6.5 versus the 7.3. But again, I'm just beating my head against the wall. When I start talking, I've just been I've been a broken record on this. I think most of my colleagues just throw the towel in before I even get 3 words out. Well, just tune out.
Well, of course, obviously, because you have been talking about this so much, and I'm sure you're hearing from your constituents, as the rest of the country is also experiencing the same thing, inflation, the hidden tax of inflation. For many people, this is becoming unbearable. Property tax, homeowners insurance is going up on most of us 40% a year, your car insurance. At some point, we have to cut the tax rate. Where are you at with trying to get our financial house in order, but also the tax base on Americans with inflation? The expansion of the dollar, too many dollars chasing too few goods and services. What are your thoughts on that?
So those same scenarios, I also laid out how much the dollar was worth back then. In 1998, that dollar is now worth 51 cents. The 2014 dollar is now worth 74 cents. The 2019 dollar is worth 80 cents. So yeah, inflation is a wicked tax and really impacts poor people the most. Rich people, people have their invest in stocks, that kind of stuff, and they can weather the storm. But in terms of taxes, I hate our current tax code. It's grotesquely complex, costs about $400 billion a year to comply with. I want to simplify and rationalize it, but the first thing we have to do is take a massive automatic tax increase off the table. So I've actually proposed a 3-step reconciliation process. Start with providing President Trump the funding he needs to secure the border, defend this nation. By the way, I got Lindsey Graham and the Budget Committee to agree to paying for that 4 years worth of spending over 4 years. So that's $85.5 billion of reduced spending times 10. That's a score of 850. That's more than half what the House is saying they're going to do in their entire one big beautiful bill. So that's a good start. But my second step would just be to extend the current tax code. Using current policy, just take that massive automatic tax increase off the table. Then the third step is the big beautiful bill, which is going to be really big and complex and difficult to pass. But let's take our time to try and get it right. I mean, you have to admit that as much as the Tax Cut and Jobs Act improved our economy, it's always going to happen when you let American people keep more of their hard-earned money. But it's a failure because it expires. Business provisions have already expired. A lot of it's going to expire automatically in 2026. So that ought to be our first criteria. Whatever we do, let's make sure it doesn't automatically expire someday in the future. Nothing's permanent around here, but let's create a tax package that doesn't automatically expire so we can bring certainty to the American economy, which is, again, extending the current tax code is as awful as it is, brings certainty. And then, again, it'll be uncertain what we're going to end up with, but at least we've taken a massive tax increase off the table.
Yeah. Let's talk about tariffs and manufacturers around the country, but also your state of Wisconsin. How will this tariff battle impact manufacturing?
Listen, I'm highly concerned, and I've expressed that to the administration, to the president. Take a look at the market's reaction. So I will willingly admit that President Trump has effectively used tariffs to get countries to do things they should do but won't do. He used tariffs brilliantly in his administration to get Mexico to cooperate with his Remain in Mexico policy that largely secured the border. But the fact is, in Wisconsin, we've got farmers who will be affected. We've got home builders. We've got manufacturers that compete globally. There'll be a huge competitive disadvantage. We'll be retaliated against. I mean, first round, Harley Davidson was retaliated against. Our Wisconsin dairy farmers were. So I'm highly concerned, and the president ought to be as well. I mean, he always points to the stock market when it's doing well after his election. He ought to be looking at the stock market and go, this isn't going over too well.
Let's talk about American farmers, because obviously you have a lot of farmers in Wisconsin. I think he put out a social media post the other day about farmers, get ready farmers, you're going to be selling more of your product inside the country. What do you know about his plan for agriculture? All right, let's hold right there. Let's hold right there before we get the answer. Maybe even back it up so we get the question in there and then the answer. My interviewing yesterday, Senator Ron Johnson, we're just now releasing it for the first time to our radio audience, our VCY audience, which is, of course, includes obviously a lot of folks from Wisconsin. So there you go. And then we'll hear what our friend Congressman Glenn Grothman of the 6th District of Wisconsin thought of the speech last night. And then we're going to open up for your phone calls. All right, see what you thought of last night's speech. Worldview Radio, I'm Brannon Howse. Thanks for listening. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Brannon Howse. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com. All right, welcome back. Glad you're with us. Worldview Radio, our website, worldviewradio.com. Hey, be sure to stay tuned for Crosstalk with your host, Jim Schneider, coming up at the top of the hour on the VCY America Radio Network, 2 p.m. Central. If you don't have a VCY terrestrial radio station in your market. You can listen online, V as in Victor, vcy.org, vcy.org. All right. America's original Christian talk program since the 1970s with your host, Jim Schneider. Now, as I said, have never interviewed U.S. Senator Ron Johnson before. I actually was holding a Worldview Weekend rally somewhere in Wisconsin, and he was in the lobby doing a press conference. I walked by him while he was running, but I've never met him and never interviewed him. And so this was my first opportunity. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on the interview after it's completed, and we hear a little bit from Congressman Grothman. So we'll open the phone lines up for that. So let's go back to this pre-taped interview that I'm airing for the first time that was taped yesterday afternoon. Listen to this. Let's talk about American farmers, because obviously you have a lot of farmers in Wisconsin. I think he put out a social media post the other day about farmers, get ready farmers, you're going to be selling more of your product inside the country. What do you know about his plan for agriculture?
Again, I understand why other countries want to grow their own food. And so, for example, Canada uses a supply management system. Increases the price of dairy to Canadian farmers or to Canadian consumers. That's the choice they're making. We could literally wipe out all the dairy farms in Canada if we engage in totally free trade. So I understand why countries don't necessarily want to do that. Again, trade is an incredibly complex issue here. And you have to understand that it's a double-edged sword. It can have some good purposes, but it can really, come back and bite you. And I'm concerned about the biting right now. President Trump admits that these tariffs are going to create pain. I hope he's willing to try and alleviate as much pain as possible.
Let's talk about Fauci. So many of our audience members appreciate your leadership with your panels. You've had many of our regulars here, Dr. McCullough and so many that I could name. Dr. Thorpe, we produce his show each and every week, Dr. Thorpe. Will Fauci ever face any consequences for his actions?
Well, I sure hope that the full story is eventually told. We already know pretty much the full story of Anthony Fauci leading up to COVID. Bobby Kennedy wrote a brilliant book, The Real Anthony Fauci. If there's defamation in there, you would think that Bobby Kennedy would have been sued 16 times on 16 different ways. He hasn't been. So you don't need to read much more than The Real Anthony Fauci to realize this is a really bad person. Okay, and his arrogance was the reason our response to COVID was such a miserable failure, and that hundreds of thousands of people died because of hospital protocols using remdesivir, ventilators. The whole 6 feet apart is total BS. Masks were total BS. So Logan, we need to hold him accountable. Scott Alice has a really good piece in the Wall Street Journal today, is America still needs a COVID reckoning. We can't just paper this thing over and forget it never happened. We need to make sure that America understands exactly what happened, that people are exposed. Is he ever going to go to jail? No, because he got a pardon, but that's a double-edged sword for him because he has no Fifth Amendment protections in terms of testifying fully and truthfully. And so right now I'm in the process working with Bobby Kennedy with his radical transparency process. It doesn't happen overnight. But he's dedicated to it, and I'm hoping that radical transparency will get us all of his emails unredacted. We were down to the last 50 pages. They would not provide those. The Biden administration wouldn't. I'm assuming there's something pretty incriminating in there, but we'll have to wait and see. But we need documents first out of HHS. We need to find out what they knew, when they knew it, what they covered up, what information they didn't provide the American public because they were just 100% dedicated to vaccines, the only, or not even vaccine, the injection. The COVID injection was the only way out of the pandemic. So they ignored and sabotaged early treatment. They need to be held accountable for that. We need a full accounting and a real good history of exactly what happened.
Well said. How concerned are you, Senator, about bird flu and some of the same characters using this, maybe now not to go after us per se, but to go after the food supply, to go after farmers, to go after poultry and cattle. And then, we're going to start vaccinating animals with this mRNA and PCR testing. How concerned are you, if at all, that this might be an attack on farming and our food supply?
Well, one thing I learned during COVID, I learned all kinds of things during COVID medically. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a medical researcher, but I learned about the concept of antibody-dependent enhancements. And, examples of where they vaccinated flocks, and what ended up happening is the virus mutated and became even more deadly. Now, generally, viruses mutate, they become more contagious, but less deadly because it doesn't do good to kill off all your hosts because you can't really spread. So again, there's all kinds of things about biology and vaccinology and immunology that we completely ignored. So I am concerned about what we're doing with bird flu. I think we need to be concerned about that as a virus, but this mass killing off of flocks, obviously driving up the price of eggs, I'm not sure it necessarily works. We've always had avian types of flus. Are we overreacting? Possibly. Are there political agendas beyond our overreacting? Possibly. I mean, I just don't know. That's the problem that we now know we have, is that science has been corrupted. Research has been corrupted. People in powerful positions utilize their position to advantage, powerful corporations who are pushing vaccines, that type of thing, to the detriment of the general public. So you just can't trust these people anymore. It's a very sad state of affair. We can't trust the medical establishment. We can't trust the federal health agencies. There's very few people we can trust. Media, I mean, what do you believe? I mean, can people believe what I'm telling them? Can people believe what you're telling them? And that, by the way, has always been the purpose of, for example, Russian propaganda. They're not necessarily trying to get you to agree with them or believe what they just don't want you to believe anything. It throws the world into chaos. And right now, we're in a situation of information chaos.
Two final questions, and thank you for your time today, sir. The pharmaceutical companies and these federal agencies, there seems to be some kind of revolving door between a lot of these agencies and these big pharmaceutical companies. Is there a way to fix some of these things? And have you heard any plans from RFK Jr. on that?
Well, it seems to be because there is a huge revolving door. Listen, I'm a free market guy, freedom of speech. I think people want to spend money advertising, they should. I've come to the conclusion I don't think we should allow a big pharma to advertise. There's no salesmanship in those ads. It's just to buy the narrative so they can control they can push out their propaganda and hoodwink the American public. I think the revolving door is a huge problem. We should be able to fix it. But I think denying pharmaceuticals the ability to buy the narrative would be one of the first steps. And then return integrity to science. Have it be completely transparent. I mean, Bobby Kennedy's right. Radical transparency is the solution. Far easier said than done, though. He's finding out right now that these agencies do not want to give up their secrets. They've got all kinds of excuses, protecting personal identifying information, protecting, X, Y, and Z. And so there's all kinds of roadblocks that these agencies and the attorneys working in concert with the people in these agencies to throw up in the way of radical transparency. But Bobby Kennedy's absolutely committed to it. I believe in him, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure the American public has the truth and the information that is theirs. I mean, they own this. They pay for these studies. They pay for these agencies. They pay for the analysis. They ought to be able to see it.
Final question, sir. You didn't know what questions I was going to ask today. We didn't submit questions in advance, and you haven't sidestepped one question here. And not only have you not sidestepped them, your knowledge base on all of this, things related to epidemiology and the pandemic. So the personal question is, are you someone that reads a lot, or is it history? What is it about Senator Ron Johnson that has made him so good at doing this job that you've done with these hearings, and then being able to obtain this information, retain it, and explain it back to the taxpayer? You're not a doctor, as you've said. You're not an epidemiologist. But what is it in your skill set or your background that's made you so good at this in regards to these investigations, retaining this information, and then putting it back out to the public?
Well, you're kind, but yeah, I read constantly, nonstop, wake up in the morning till I go to bed at night. This obviously interests me. You're asking me questions of things I'm knowledgeable of. I'm not knowledgeable about all kinds of things. And quite honestly, I bring that modesty to the table here too. I've said it in my events, it amazes me the knowledge base that mankind has accumulated over the millennia and how rapidly what we know is increasing. But what we don't know, I still think vastly exceeds what we do. And so I bring that level of modesty to the table. I mean, the human body is unbelievably complex. It's quite honestly, unbelievable how much we know about it, about all these receptors and, what binds to what. And, we know a lot, but we don't have all the answers, not by a long shot. So you have to bring that humility and honesty to the table here when we discuss these things and have an open mind. So I have a very open mind. I don't draw conclusions. I'm very skeptical. And that, by the way, that is the definition of science, skepticism. That's how you advance science, is you go, okay, I know this is generally accepted as true, but is it really? Start poking holes in it. That's how you've actually advanced science over the millennia.
Well, Senator, thank you for your time today. Thank you for the hearings, the public hearings, educating the public, using your position to help educate the public, and giving a platform to people like Dr. Peter McCullough and Dr. James Thorpe and so many others that we work with here. I know our audience appreciates it, and I know a lot of our folks in Wisconsin here on the network appreciate you as well. So hope you'll come back, and thank you for your time.
Well, thanks for doing what you do, and appreciate the opportunity. Have a great day.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Ron Johnson checking in there, folks, from the great state of Wisconsin. And, of course, you can find him on social media. I was just looking him up on social media. He tweets out quite a bit. I guess they call it X now. So you can follow what he's doing. Again, appreciate him coming on and the knowledge base there. And, again, taking on this vital issue related to COVID. And notice how he said so-called vaccines. And notice how he did that? Because, see, he knows. He's done his homework. He's done his research on that. And very impressive interview. My first time to ever interview him. I was impressed. I hope he'll come back. All right, there you go. We're back live, 127 Central, 227 Eastern Standard, Senator Ron Johnson. And we're going to try to do more of that. And I will tell you, folks, we take this platform very seriously to use it for what we're supposed to be doing, particularly when we're talking about terrestrial radio and FCC. It's to educate the people, to be a public service, education-wise, and of course, as a Christian broadcaster ministry. And we're trying to make inroads with more and more people in key places, like Senator Ron Johnson. That's something we've been working on for quite a while, by the way. It's not like we haven't asked to interview him. We just had to be really persistent. And usually what it takes, folks, is to have one good interview, good experience where they realize you're fair, you're reasonable, that it's worth their time. And once you build that relationship and they have a good experience, you can generally get them back again and again. And of course, we've experienced that with another elected official in Washington, who's in Washington, but elected out of the state of Wisconsin, and that would be Congressman Glenn Grothman. And Congressman and I have built, I would say, a personal friendship, to be honest with you. In fact, it's to the point now where a lot of times he doesn't deal with, his people don't deal with my people, and I don't deal with his people. I do talk to his people. I do at times go through his staff to set things up, but a lot of times he'll call me and he'll say, hey, it's been a while since I've been on. Or I'll call him, hey, it's been a while since you've been on. So we're working to build these kind of relationships because we want to be an outlet where people can come on here and speak and talk about the issues. And sometimes we're going to agree, sometimes we're going to disagree. But look, the mainstream cultural Marxist media does not want the American people to have this kind of access. Look, I could do a whole show on what is going on with the White House Correspondents Association, how they're treating our network, even though we filled out the paperwork, paid the money to join. These guys want to be the gatekeepers. And what we're doing is going around them, right to your elected officials, and letting them speak directly to you. We take that seriously. We're going to do more of that. Don't go away. Congressman Grothman next. Hello, I'm Brannon Howse. Melissa and I have been taking Bella Grace, this powerful elixir, since last fall, 2023. The results have been amazing. My hands would crack and bleed, deep cuts and cracks every winter for years. No matter what we did, we couldn't get them to stop cracking and bleeding. This year, I took Bella Grace, no cracking, no bleeding. My acid reflux, gone. Haven't had to take a Pepsid. My hair growth, the last 2 times I had my hair cut, the lady had to use thinning shears on my hair. That's amazing. We've also received incredible feedback from you, our listening audience, and the impact it's had for you. This is loaded with astaxanthin. That's a powerful antioxidant. Collagen, but top grade collagen. Studies show 95% of it is being absorbed in the body because of the way they develop it. Then we have something called cat's claw. That's an anti-inflammatory from a vine in Peru. It's the bark, and it's an anti-inflammatory. There are about 80 clinical trials on Bella Grace. Please get a subscription now and save. MelissaHowse, BG.com. All right, welcome back. Glad you're with us. Worldview Radio, our website, worldviewradio.com. And of course, the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court refused to bolster President Donald Trump's foreign aid freeze, reinstating a lower court order that requires the quick disbursement of as much as $2 billion owed to contractors for already completed work. Really, what completed work? And what kind of, work is being done? Contraceptives for the Gaza? Promotion of the LGBTQ agenda? Now, I don't know, if you go over to worldviewreport.com, that's your daily aggregated news site. I just put up an article over there, and it's entitled, "Can a President Refuse to Spend Funds Approved by Congress?" This is actually an article dated February 4th, 2025. The Constitution, Article 1, Section 9, grants Congress the power of the purse to approve spending in the federal budget in the Appropriations Clause, which reports in part, quote, "No money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by law," end quote. The Constitution then delegates to the President the task of spending approved funds in the Take Care Clause, which requires the chief executive, quote, "shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed," end quote. The most noted example of a conflict over the impoundment took place in the 1970s when President Richard Nixon refused to spend funds on numerous programs approved by Congress. During public hearings on the matter in 73, Nixon critics said the president was using his impoundment powers to effectively veto programs by cutting off their funds. Quote, "There has never been a more appropriate time than the president to take up this crucial constitutional question of the role of the Congress and its relationship with the executive and whether or not we have a co-equal branches of government," end quote. So said Senator Hubert Humphrey. President Nixon's supporters believed that Nixon was managing funds in an inflationary environment using his take care powers. Quote, "The president's obligation is to faithfully execute the laws, plainly includes an obligation to prevent waste. Impounding to save taxpayers' dollars has always had the full support of the Congress," end quote. That's what the Assistant Attorney General Joseph Snead argued. Congress passed the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 74 in response to the controversy. Title 10 in the Act is commonly referred to as the Impoundment Control Act, or ICA, and it requires the president to report to Congress when he impounds funds as a deferment or a temporary delay or a rescission, a permanent cancellation of spending. And apparently the Supreme Court considered this in a case in 1975 when New York City, the city sued after it did not receive funds allocated to it under the Federal Water Pollution Control Act amendments. He had vetoed the bill, but Congress overrode the veto. Nixon then reduced program spending. In a unanimous decision, Justin Byron White wrote that, quote, "The sole issue before us is whether the 1972 Act permits the administrator to allot to the states under 205 less than the entire amount authorized by the appropriated. We hold the act does not permit such action and affirm the Court of Appeals," end quote. So another effort, writes the article, to give the president more flexibility in controlling how funds allocated by Congress are spent was the line item veto of 1996. And of course, we go on from there. The bottom line is this is really actually a long-standing controversy. I had to go look it up because I'm like, wait a minute. Can't the president decide these things? And so we'll get into this more because there are more court cases I won't bore you with right now. But it seems to me very odd that the president would be unable to stop waste on behalf of the American people, particularly when we find out there's money, well, it appears to be money laundering. So we'll keep you posted on this. We'll bring on some lawyer. I'll bring on a lawyer, a constitutional lawyer like Joe Walverton on this. All right, before I get ready to open the phone lines up, I did do an interview last night. He was with us before the speech and then right after the speech. We had with us Congressman Glenn Grothman from his office there. He had to walk back over to his office and he joined us. Let me play that for you before we open the phone lines. Here we go. It's, again, 11:31 for Congressman Glenn Grothman. He started out this evening's broadcast with us. Then he went over to the rotunda. We just saw him a few minutes ago shaking hands with the president on his way out. He joins us to wrap up our coverage tonight. Congressman, welcome back. And we commented and saw you shake hands with the president on his way out. Did you guys exchange any words?
told him it was a great speech, and he smiled and acknowledged that. I guess he acknowledged that I was right, because it was a very good speech. I think we actually hit most of the points when we predicted what he was going to talk about. He certainly spent a lot of time talking about the border, which I think is his biggest immediate accomplishment. The great reduction in the number of people crossing that southern border, maybe a 40th or a 50th, as many people were crossing it a year and a half ago. So that was certainly good. I think he dwelt a little bit on his almost assassination in Butler. He attributed it to God, which I attribute it to as well, and felt he'd been saved to save the nation, which was good. He introduced Elon Musk, who I think is doing a good job, did not back away with him, was not embarrassed by him. I thought that was good. He dealt with the transgenders again, which is just a horrible thing in our society. Like I said, the worst thing about this transgender stuff is what's happening to these kids. People having surgeries done on themselves. People are, in essence, ruining their life with this transgender stuff. And one more time, he stood up to the psychologist, psychiatrist industry and the guidance counselor industry, I guess you can say, and said, no, this is not true. You're either born a man or a woman, and that's the way it is. So I was glad to see him not back away there. He gave us a little new tax thing, saying we could get tax deduction for interest payments on your car if you bought it in America, as well as going through his other tax provisions that he wanted. By the way, I know people on the committee dealing with taxes, and it will be hard to make good on all his tax promises, but we're going to do the best we can. So all the way across the board, a great speech. The longest speech, which is not surprising. I'm from Wisconsin. I attended, maybe 6 or 7 speeches this year during his campaign, because, of course, Wisconsin was a battleground state, and usually he goes for about an hour and 40 minutes. I think he may have gone longer than that tonight. And one of the reasons it was so long is there was so much applause. I mean, it seemed like you were up and down all night. I think I probably lost 6 or 7 pounds just jumping up and down again and again tonight. So, but that's the way it was. I was a little disappointed the Democrats were so sullen. There was a rude Democrat from, I believe, Houston, Congressman Green, had to be kicked out. I've never seen that before. But other Democrats had shown signs. There were about 3 women in front of me who took off their top to reveal a T-shirt with a disrespectable sign on it. So they showed that to President Trump, and then they took off. But things like, for example, when President Trump was talking about Melania. Now, that's automatic courtesy to applaud for the First Lady. Nobody applauded for the First Lady on the Democrat side. I mean, they were just really in an angry, ugly, partisan behavior is what we saw from them. And I might be wrong. I remember hearing speeches by Joe Biden or Barack Obama, but at least they had some lines in there that as American, you're almost obligated to stand for. I didn't see any. Maybe at the end, a few Democrats stood when maybe they felt they were looking a little ridiculous to be that partisan. But if that's maybe one thing your viewers did not get at home, the degree to which the Democrats sat there all night long.
Yeah, we were talking with Colonel Manus and Leo, and you and I have discussed this several times. The fact that the president of the United States has to go to a joint session of Congress and say, I'm declaring there's only 2 genders. We're stopping men being in women's sports. We're going to stop sex changes on children. I went through some of the list of things he was saying tonight in his speech, and Republicans are applauding, and Democrats are sitting over there not applauding and won't stand up for that. And I'm thinking, what kind of message are you sending to Americans? And now Americans, maybe who haven't been checked in on this, can realize there really is about half of Congress that is for this kind of perversion. And then I further said tonight with Leo and the Colonel, can you imagine if your my grandparents, our great-grandparents, our congressmen, your grandparents came back, they had no context for anything other than they were brought back to watch this speech and then get their response. They would have no contextual understanding of why a president would be talking like that. And it would just seem so out of I mean, they couldn't even comprehend that the country that some of them served in the military for and fought for this country would be talking about men and women's sports, sex changes for children. It would make no concepts. No, they'd have no understanding.
You're right. The scariest thing is almost half the population voted to continue those policies. They apparently don't have a problem with the government paying to do sex changes on 15-year-olds, or at least halfway towards sex changes on 15-year-olds. I mean, it's scary. We attended a prayer breakfast, a couple of weeks ago, and I think one of the speeches that kind of hit home to me is we got a reprieve. You know, we've got 4 more years here to get America back to normal, but we have to work to change the way some of these Americans think, because it is scary that 48 or 49% of the population voted for presidential candidates that agree with this nonsense. And we all have to work to make sure 4 years from now, our fellow citizens are thinking a little bit more reasonably with a little bit of common sense. By the way, that was a phrase President Trump used several times tonight. We've got to bring back common sense.
Common sense, indeed. Congressman, I don't want to keep you. You were so generous with us before the speech. Now, 11:38 p.m. Eastern Standard Time after the speech. I hope you guys don't have any kind of early roll call vote in the morning.
No, I'm sure there won't be a lot of people attending in the meetings tomorrow at 8 a.m.
Well, thank you for being with us.
We do have a Bible. I did notice a Bible study at 8 a.m. There are actually several Bible studies going on in Congress, which maybe your listeners back home are not aware of.
Yes, well, they probably are not, some of them, but I am. So several Bible studies on Capitol Hill, one at 8 a.m. So I need to let you go so you can get some sleep before you have to be back up at the Bible study. But I do want to tell people you are with the 6th District in Wisconsin, and we're looking forward to having you with us and greet the crowd.
Correct.
And come up on the stage and
6th
speak.
District in Wisconsin.
And speak for us on April 15th at the Walk-On Show Expo Center. We're looking forward to having you with us.
Absolutely. Be there or be square.
Thank you, Congressman. Get some sleep.
Yep.
All right. Congressman Glenn Grothman checking in. There you go, folks. Let's open the phone lines. Your thoughts, 1-800-347-9829. Your thoughts, your comments, your questions on last night's speech, the interview with Senator Ron Johnson, my interview with Congressman Glenn Grothman. Both happen to be from Wisconsin. 1-800-347-9829, 1-800-347-9829. Someone asked, how about getting an interview with RFK Jr.? Well, I've already interviewed him once before. That's in our vault. And yes, we are going to work on an interview with him as well. We have not yet sent out our letters because we were waiting on a lot of these guys to confirm. There's still some we're still waiting to get confirmed. There's also some of them that will be underneath, like the Secretary of Defense, RFK Jr., and others. We know who some of these people are, our team does, and we're waiting on some of those folks to still be confirmed and put into place. So we're trying to give the administration and everybody a chance to get into their offices, get settled, a few more to get confirmed. And then, yes, we will be sending out a lot of letters very quickly here in the next few days, starting to ask for interviews with a lot of different people. And I appreciate the fact that so many of you are concerned. Great interview. Very impressed, says Heather. So Heather, thank you for that. We'd love your thoughts and comments on those interviews or the speech last night. 1-800-347-9829, 1-800-347-9829. Phone lines are open. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll go right to your calls just as soon as we get back. Hello, I'm Brannon Howse. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com. that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview. What's Bernie's wife's name? All right, welcome back. Glad you're with us. Worldview Radio again, 1-800-347-9829. Your thoughts, your comments, your questions. Let's go right away to the phone lines. Line 1, Bernie from Wisconsin. Hi, Bernie. Thanks for calling in.
Hi. I want to make 2 comments. One on in regards to the eggs. I was looking it up, and it said 101 million eggs were destroyed in 2020 that were specifically chicken that bear eggs that were completely destroyed, but it was no effects on your regular chicken. So why would only the chickens who were egg producers be the ones that had the flu, and the other chickens did not? So, I mean, that to me sounds very suspicious.
Well, you're smart. You're a smart lady. And I'll tell you, we had on epidemiologist Nick Helsher the other day with the McCullough Foundation, and he said they'd go in there and they do these tests, and they'll grab the test from several chickens, and then they put all of that into their testing system, PCR test, whatever the little system is. But they're taking it from maybe 7 or 8, 9, 10, and they're combining the test and then putting it through their machine. And then they come back, oh, we've got some bird flu here. And then they go ahead and they call the entire group of chickens on that property, wherein somebody across the other side or in the other building may not even have it. The worst thing that we have seen so far, I'm not a doctor and not an epidemiologist, but the medical doctors and the epidemiologists I do interview have said the worst we have seen so far is someone working with these chickens who ends up with the pink eye, okay, with pink eye. I believe, and many of the guys I interview and gals I interview believe, Bernie, that your response is the right response. It's a common sense response. But the goal here, there is something up. You're basically saying something's not right here. You're exactly right. Something's not right here. And we believe what they're doing this time is attacking the food supply. Last time the emphasis was on us and getting us the shot. Now it's the food supply.
If I go to the grocery store and eggs are higher than me buying a whole chicken, to me that doesn't make any sense. It all works together. But on my second point is, I think we have to take a look at the hatred that we saw at the meeting on yesterday, but also the fact that our spiritual warfare is really intensified because we have Moloch and we have Ishtar spirits that are roaming around within our nation, and they've had 4 years to propaganda the woke idea and ideologies, which is why it is such a huge battle. But definitely we are in a spiritual warfare of old ideologies of the past coming throughout.
I agree. And I think it's Daniel 10, where Daniel's praying. He's asking for help. And the angel that was coming to him was delayed for 21 days, fighting an enemy, a demon that's over Persia. So I think that does show us the demonic influence. I think it can show us, I'm not going to be dogmatic about it, but I think it can show us the demonic influence that demons have over specific nations. I agree. Always great to hear from you, Bernie. Thank you. Let's run real quick to Jim, line 3. Hi, Jim. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, Brannon. I just wanted to make you aware of legislation that I've introduced through my local congressman, 3rd District here in Wisconsin, regarding, the title of it is Fit to Serve and Accountability Act of 2025. And there's so many people in our government that are compromised that should not be in there. We need to look in their backgrounds and they need to be removed ASAP. And as far as accountability, I hear that so many times. It's like all these treasonous acts have happened in our country. These people that have violated their oath of office and they've done so many other things to the detriment of our country. They need to be held accountable, and there needs to be a law that says this is what you're doing is wrong, and you need to be held accountable and punished. So I want to make you aware of that.
Thank you, Jim, for that. I agree 100%. I think DOJ kind of getting to that because it can see everything that's being spent and where it's going. And I think there are some of these people that came in with, a net worth of maybe $100,000-$200,000, and they leave the government worth $30 million. We got to figure out how that is. And I think we know. I think we're starting to figure it out with the NGOs that some of them work with. Let's go to David in Nevada, line 2. Hi, David. Hi, David, line 2. David from Nevada.
Yeah.
All right. Are you there?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Nope. I'll be as brief as I can.
Okay.
About 2 years ago in February, I don't remember for sure, it was 1 or 2 years ago, I think it was, General Paxton won a case with the state of Texas in federal court, and what the winning concept was that Nancy Pelosi's budget that she passed was not constitutional because she did not have a quorum. To rely upon proxy votes for a quorum, the judge ruled was not constitutional. So how can we possibly be looking at some kind of a continuing resolution on a budget that wasn't constitutional?
Well, that's a very good point. I think it's something we should be talking about. I like the way you're thinking, David. Let's go to Alex in Virginia, line 4. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Brannon. I appreciate all you do. I know I have to be quick. So my wife is falling for this measles outbreak, and I've held her at bay for so long, but now she's telling me she's going to vaccinate my daughter who already has autism because of these stupid vaccines, and I've given her so much information from Karen Kingston and, a lot of the people you provide, and Del Bigtree. She refuses to watch Vaxxed, and she's threatening me with that, and I don't know what to do. I don't want my daughter getting the MMR shot. She's doing so much better because I refuse to let her get any more vaccines. And she's telling me, well, would you rather have a dead child or a child who has to get additional therapy and blah, blah, blah?
Well, the music's playing, so let me answer real quick. Alex, first of all, I'm sorry you're in that situation. Secondly, I'm literally texting with Karen as you're talking to me. She's coming on my broadcast tonight to talk about this very topic, why this measles outbreak is exploding. And I'm telling you, I think she's going to tell us that there is, as we heard from epidemiologist Nick Holscher, Dr. James Thorpe, MD, I think she's going to tell us the same thing. It's tied back to the vaccines. These mRNA vaccines are damaging, particularly the children's immune system. So this is absolutely contradictory to what she herself wants to accomplish. And you're right on target. See if you can get her to listen tonight, because we're going to be talking about that. Folks, thanks for listening. Take care. And that's our broadcast. Look at that, folks. That call is heartbreaking. Alex in Virginia. Pray for Alex, okay? Pray for Alex. Pray for his wife. Pray that the Lord will soften her heart. It's just really horrific, the number of marriages and families that have been put under this situation because of the media, the propaganda, the lies that are pumped out. And then someone like Alex tries to get his wife to listen to the opposite side of the debate. And this is, again, heartbreaking on a personal level. And it's not just vaccines, folks. This goes all the way down to this LGBTQ trans agenda. The families that find themselves split because a spouse has bought into that. I mean, I just thank the Lord every day that I married who I did. I thank the Lord every day I married my wife, that I did not marry someone else that was not going to be compatible with me, that was going to be a constant struggle and fight every day. I can't imagine living like that. And I know some of you do. I can't imagine how physically, spiritually, emotionally draining that is to deal with that every day. And to miss out on the harmony and tranquility of a marriage where the husband and wife are in unison on, well, pretty much everything, their entire worldview. I tell my kids all the time, next to becoming a believer, the biggest decision you're going to make is who you marry. And today, you need to talk about their worldview and how it applies to these issues of so-called vaccines, how it applies to the issue of sexuality, discipline, their worldview. Are they really saved? Are you really marrying someone that is a believer? Because, as the old saying goes, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And we get so many letters here, and a lot of them, I hate to say it, are from men. They're from men, and their wives have bought into the woke. They've bought into all the propaganda, and the men are fighting, try to get them on the right page. It's sad, but it's true. So I would think that any of you that are listening would probably join me in making sure one of the serious conversations you have with your children and grandchildren is who they marry. Because everything from raising the kids to the finances, to the what you want in your home, I mean, all of it comes down to who you marry. So again, heartbreaking. All I can do is say, pray for Alex and pray for his wife that she'll soften up on this. But folks, this is another perfect example of why we're here. We're not just here marking time. We're not just here filling a time slot. There are other things I could go do if that was the case. This isn't an occupation for us. It is, but that's not why we're here, because this is my job. I've been doing this 35 years. So at this point, if I wanted to walk away and go do something else or, quote, retire, end quote, I could, but I have no plans to do that because I don't want to retire. I enjoy my work. We're here because we want to be here, not because we have to be here. We're not here because we have to be, and now we're just looking to fill time every day. We're here because we want to make a difference. I want to finish my life knowing that we used our gifts and abilities and we have made a difference in the lives of people. And we get a lot of letters where people are thanking us. I had a lady, her name, I think is Heidi, from South Dakota. And I was standing in a lobby of a Baptist church in South Dakota, Aberdeen, South Dakota, almost, I would say probably 33 years ago. And I don't know how I remember it, but in my mind's eye, I can see it, staying in that lobby. My wife and I were there for the weekend, Pastor Salem's church, Aberdeen, South Dakota, and this young mom with her kids hovering around her legs. And this young mom is saying, I don't think I can homeschool. I really don't think I can do it. And she's almost in tears. And I looked down at those little kids. I looked at her and I said, that's what the left, that's what the liberals, that's what the educrats want you to think. You're an intelligent woman. You can teach them to read and write and do math. Well, today, a year or so ago, Heidi came back into my life, good friends with Tamara Scott, and I was on a broadcast. She was on my broadcast, and she said, I'm that person. Do you remember? I'm like, of course I remember. I don't know how, after all the thousands of people we've come in contact with, how I remember. Not only do I remember, in my mind, I see her as 33 years old with her kids holding on to her leg. These little bitty kids. Now these kids are grown. What is the point I'm making? There's so many families that we have encouraged and impacted. And she said that. She said, you have impacted our family multi-generational. That's what we want to do. That's why we're here. And we need to help people like Alex and his wife. So pray for them. And thanks for listening. Take care.
You are watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan, and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
charges. For people who may not know, I mean, they give advice to the military about what is lawful and what isn't. Not surprisingly, there's been some backlash to those who are worried about their removal. One Georgetown law professor says this: Trump also firing the Army, Navy, and Air Force JAGs. In some ways, that's even more chilling than firing the 4 stars. It's what you do when you're planning to break the law. You get rid of any lawyers who might try to slow you down. Your response to her?
I don't know who Rosa is and what her hyperbole is all about. Ultimately, we want lawyers who give sound constitutional advice and don't exist to attempt to be roadblocks to anything that happens in their spots. What we know about these TJAGs, they're called TJAGs inside the military. Traditionally, they've been elected by each other or chosen by each other, which is exactly how it works often with the chairman as well. Small group of insulated officers who perpetuate the status quo. Well, guess what? Status quo hasn't worked very well at the Pentagon. It's time for fresh blood. So we're going to open.
The military service JAGs, they were fired by Secretary Hegseth for a reason. That's the big question. Welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday here. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube, our X Spaces simulcast, Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Well, that's the big question, folks. What is the reason all 3 of the service's top lawyers were removed in the first DOD Friday night firing, as we call them these days? Well, we're going to work through that answer very specifically today because there's a lot going on with the weaponization of the military legal system. Yes, I said it, and you shouldn't take my words lightly because I'm someone who was privileged to wield court-martial authority and supervise JAG officers as a senior commander. I once had absolute faith in the JAG Corps and our system of military justice, but something has gone wrong somewhere. I'm sure it did happen over time, as these things do, including when I was in the service. But the public culmination of this disaster was when whistleblowers revealed our troops in America's military had their rights stripped from them. We see today open law breaking by commanders and a strong record of really bad legal advice by the JAG Corps to those commanders. These actions have resulted in an estimated nearly 100,000 service members being forced to leave doing what they love, serving our country, members who've been physically devastated and are not being compensated for those injuries, and multiple unintended consequences damaging recruiting, which is coming back up, retention, and most importantly, damaging our readiness to fight and win America's wars. Well, I'm honored to have 2 guests today to help us understand why this firing needed to be done and get to the underlying situation so we can talk about it and get it out in the open. Commander Rob Green is an active duty U.S. Navy commander. He's the author of the book, Defending the Constitution Behind Enemy Lines. He's the author of the Declaration of Military Accountability and was recently honored by President Trump with a Defenders of Freedom Award down in Mar-a-Lago. My second guest today is retired U.S. Navy Captain Dan McCarthy. He is a Naval Academy graduate, was a surface warfare officer who was selected, which is a competitive selection, for the law education program. He graduated from Duke Law School with honors and graduated at the master's level from George Washington Law with the highest honors you can get. He's also served in the Navy JAG Corps, including multiple tours as trial counsel in field commands around the world, was an executive assistant to the Judge Advocate General, and was special assistant for legal issues to the Secretary of the Navy, and was a commanding officer. That's a big resume for a U.S. Navy lawyer. Dan's post-military career is just as exceptional. He served veterans in city government. He's been a chief assistant state attorney and served at the Court of Appeals level. He's currently the federal special master at the D.C. Circuit Court, assisting with Foreign Service Immunity Act claims filed against, guess who? The Islamic Republic of Iran, the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. And those claims are by U.S. military personnel killed and injured in Iraq. Rob, welcome back to the show. And Dan, welcome to the Rob Maness Show for the first time. Thank you both for spending some time with us.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Yes, I agree, Colonel.
Well, guys, let me pitch this first question out to both of you and just give me your takes based on your experience and what you've seen. What the core issue is as for these firings of all 3 service JAGs all at the same time.
Well, I normally would need to defer to the gentleman with the significant resume that you just read. What an honor to be here with him talking to you today. But I'll just give a quick one-liner on that. We have, over the last almost couple decades, lost touch with what the Constitution fundamentally means, and the law profession in the Navy is due for a reset. And I'll start with that, and then I'll turn it over.
Well,
Dan,
thank you, Rob.
based on your, go ahead.
I said, thank you, Colonel. And I appreciate the introduction. That was yesterday. What we're here to talk about now is the brave men and women patriots that serve every day, and our concern that they receive the best possible support, mentoring, legal advice, and leadership. And I think that we have reason to be concerned about that.
Yeah, we do. And as Rob mentioned, and Secretary Hegseth mentioned in the little opening clip there, we want attorneys that are, Judge Advocate General attorneys that will give sound constitutional advice and not be wedded to things like institutional norms, wedded to protecting the institution itself. And I think that's a big part of the issue, Dan. You've served at every level, I think. Can you give us some insight historically as to how we might have gotten here based on what you saw?
Well, I certainly know how it's changed. And I can tell you, I had the great benefit or opportunity or blessing to serve for Secretary of the Navy John Dalton from 1992 to 1998. I had 6 years as his legal advisor, which is an extended period. That position is usually a one-year position. It just happened, if you'll think back to the early 90s, that Tailhook came along. And the more I worked with Secretary Dalton on Tailhook, the more he wanted me to stay. And he wanted me to remain part of his team as long as he was the Secretary of the Navy. And one of the things that's critical, if you're going to be the legal advisor in situations like this, is not to say yes, but to say no when no is the right answer. Very often the military can get caught up a little bit in what they're trying to accomplish, or enthusiastically believe that we can do this, this, and this. The judge advocate's role is to tell the secretary what the law is, and then give him his options and possibly make a recommendation as to which option is appropriate. What appears to have happened is that we brought in a number of people for whatever reason. I've had some reason to believe that perhaps it was a focus on DEI and woke sort of thinking. We brought in a group of JAGs that became yes men. And yes men do not serve either their leader well or the men and women that put their uniform on every day and go out there and put their life at risk for the safety and freedom of this country. So once we had a few issues that seemed to show that very clearly. One was the mandatory vaccination program. I knew as soon as I heard it that can't be legal. And I was consulted by a few people, and I said, just, fight it. It's not right. There is no legal authority to separate people for not taking an experimental drug. And some tried to argue back to me at the time that it's not an experimental drug, that it's FDA approved, and even if the two drugs, the one that was FDA approved and the one that was being utilized in the Department of Defense, that they were close enough. But I can tell you, for instance, I had the benefit of having some great children. And my first son, John, went to the Naval Academy.